I see your posts. Most of your posts are
Food.
either out of Metro Manila or food or now a dog. Are you officially completely retired? I mean, how do
Yes,
you...
I am. I'm retired from government, from CCP. I always say that.
He's busier now than ever.
Yun nga yung point ko What keeps you busy?
But I'm full time, as I always say, I'm full time arts
Yeah, full-time
and
artist.
culture, and I've gone back to my passion, which is really community work, arts and culture work, which is based in community. So, parang my adopted hometown now is Dipolog in Dapitan in Zamboanga del Norte, and it happened by accident. Actually, quite serendipitous what happened. Right after the pandemic, we flew to Dipolog for a brief vacation, and I haven't been to Dapitan and nor to the Rizal Shrine, so I was very curious. So when we stepped into the Rizal Shrine, there was a guide, and then the guide mentioned someone's name, Don Mariano Hamoy, and my friend was with me, suddenly like perked up and said, "That's my family name. Do you think I'm related to Hamoy?" So, well, call your cousins or you're here. So he started calling his cousins and he said, ka ba? That's your lolo. And Don Mariano Hamoy turned out to be the closest business associate of Jose Rizal when he was in Dapitan. So biglang, ganun pala yun, ano? When you have a personal relationship to history, you become suddenly interested. So became, right at that moment, an
Kay
instant
Lolo.
history buff. You know?
Kay Lolo Pepe.
Where before,
interesado.
So he called his cousin, and his cousin, apparently during the whole pandemic, started to develop their ancestral home into a museum. So then I met them, and then I told them my background from CCP. They became very interested. And then one thing led to another. And then they got very excited. Na, okay, how can you help us? Sige, sure, I'll help you develop your heritage work here, and so on and so forth. And then we had lunch the next day, and while Kat, who was one of the proprietors of the museum, was on the phone, she got to talk to another lady, and the lady suddenly said, "Oh, I know him. He directed me in my play." And she turns out to be the head of the private businesses, Halos businesses in
Zamboanga.
Si Lana. And then yun. And
Small world.
immediately, spontaneously right there, spontaneous combustion.
Yes.
These two ladies have had long dreams, repressed dreams for Dapitan, because they were all educated, raised in Manila, and thrown in Dapitan. They were trying to start up a whole heritage arts and culture initiative there. So yun, in 3 months, between those two ladies, they were able to bring Alice Reyes Dance Philippines, Ryan Cayabyab, Ambeth Ocampo.
Conduit nun.
And then in 3 months' time,
Sinong audience sila?
Dapitan. The whole city of Dapitan. It was basically palang reminding Dapitan of its heritage of Rizal, because everybody takes Rizal for granted. It's there.
Even in Dapitan?
Even in Dapitan, because it's there. Rizal Shrine, the monument. Pati tayo, di ba? He's in our posporo, he's in the cemento, he's in ganyan, but we don't really sort of take him for granted.
May nagsabi nga sa akin ginawa mo lang JP yung pangalan, hindi na nag-register na si Jose Rizal yun.
So yun, and then they organized this wonderful anniversary, an event celebrating his anniversary of arrival in Dapitan, which falls on July 17. So last year we did it for the first time with big to-do, with a reenactment, with the shows and stuff, and it got very good engagement from the Dapitanos. It was amazing because they turned up in their full Filipiniana. Even the Dapitanons lang. We reenacted his walk from this arrival to the welcome to the plaza. And from then on we said, we should do this na every year.
It's amazing listening to you. Of course, as an artist, as a creative, I can imagine this happens to you quite often. Di ba? You go somewhere, you have a vast network of creatives, lahat malikot ang utak. After 3 days, you come out of it with 1 or 2 projects and maybe 100 other ideas that will never go anywhere. I'm wondering how hellish, given that, and how much of a high you get it, but a key phrase that you said there, after the pandemic, after the pandemic, a dam burst of meeting up with friends, a dam burst of ideas. Finally, we can do. how hellish was the pandemic for
Super bad.
creatives?
Super bad. Kaming una na-apektuhan kasi live kami.
Mm.
Everything we do is live. We're not naman TV or film. So, yun, right away. Tsaka kaming unang sinut down, that first day of lockdown, nag-ikot ako, may mga theater groups that were opening that particular weekend, close. We were supposed to do Ramahari at the CCP. May rehearsal si ABS-CBN with the orchestra. Kinancel. So, immediate talaga.
Talaga. But notwithstanding that, how surprising was virtual reality and distance engagement at a distance because I know there were a lot of experimentations nonetheless, di ba? I mean,
Hindi agad-agad nangyari yun. Nung unang ginawa namin with regard to the digital platform was nag-raise kami ng funds kasi alam namin karamihan sa amin mawawala ng trabaho. So yung unang-unang efforts ng theater community was to sort of mag-fundraising tayo, ganyan-ganyan. So there was one group and our group, Phil Stage, which is a coalition of mga theater dance companies, was amongst those. We did like mga shows like on Facebook, and then we posted, and then people could just donate. Yun.
And
Yun ang
how was
unang very responsive ang mga tao. But syempre, you had to think about how long pwede mong i-sustain ito. Ang music industry naman, sina Ryan Kayabia, ganun, mga musicians naman, nag-fundraise din sila by giving, nightly concerts. And people were also raising funds. They raised about 3 million. Pero you started to wonder, habang patagal ng patagal to, gaano katagal? How long will this last?
No, baka isang buwan to.
We thought namin 1 year.
Exactly.
Akala namin 1 year lang.
Ako, mga isang buwan lang eh.
Ako, I remember.
Like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, meron na yan. CCP found itself in a unique position because 2019, remember, was the 50th anniversary celebration of the center. So we were planning so many things na big time. In fact, there was gonna be a big art and technology event, which he already like closed with collaborators in Australia, in Sydney. I don't know if you're familiar with the Vivid Sydney that they do in Sydney Harbour, where they project like large-scale projections on buildings all over. That was supposed to happen to cap the 50th anniversary, and that took like 2 or 3 years of setup. The people from Sydney already flew over, to do ocular. We already got the equipment to do everything. It needed like 25 high-powered projectors. We already got that.
Yeah.
And we already got the funding. And then the lockdown happened. So that had to be. And that went down the drain. And not only that, so many other events that were scheduled for 2020. So, and remember, CCP also takes care of at least 10 resident companies, right? And you're talking about sustaining these resident companies. So isa yung pinakaunang problem that we had to address. Remember, if dancers don't dance, they lose their muscles. And if they lose their muscles, you will lose a whole generation of dancers who you've trained for so many years. Diba? The same time with singers and actors, they need a stage to perform. So mawawala lahat yun. So that was the first thing. So interestingly, before that, we were, we had parang upsurge of digitization. It was preparation for the 50th anniversary. We were like digitizing to launch a whole timeline, a digital timeline. So, ang dami naming na-digitize na materials. And that allowed us to pivot immediately to the virtual platform. We saw that as a way of like, let's use muna all of our digitized content. So immediately, like 1 month after the initial shock, we were already like showing things online. And in fact, if you look at the archives, ang dami talagang pinalabas ng CCP. And I would think na CCP was one of the first to really go online and deliver at least digitized things. In fact, even Virgin Love Fest immediately had an online version which came up so interesting.
So weird. It was so weird. I was one of the actors that was cast there. You had to act in front of your laptop. Tapos syempre, let's say ikaw ka-eksena ko, nasa ibang bahay ka.
Mahina wifi ko.
Oo, talagang may time lag. Tapos hindi ka pwedeng tumingin sa co-actor mo sa screen kasi bababa yung eyeline mo. So titingin ka dun sa maliit na dot na yon. So parang ini-imagine mo lang nakausap kita. Right? But actually, I'm not looking at you because the moment I look at you, bababa na yung eye. It was crazy. But yes, they did it.
Yes.
They did
And
it.
interestingly, it garnered a lot of engagements. You know, somehow it sort of gave people hope. It gave people some kind of avenue na parang not everything was hopeless. You could do something.
May mga tricks din, like say may mag-asawa. So syempre mag-asawa sila, pwede sila isang kwarto. But that was it. So they were able to shoot together.
But that must have been violating some protocols,
protocols.
I'm sure. Unless true to life na mag-asawa yan.
Mag-asawa sila, kaya na-shoot nila.
Then we were able to do Cinemalaya,
Yes.
you know, even through the pandemic.
Really?
The whole festival.
How did you
Online.
streaming?
On
You did
stream,
it
yeah, we
streaming.
did an online streaming. And
These were shot before the pandemic.
no, we did a lot short films, puro short films. Remember, unlike the full-length feature, our short film entries are already pre-produced films. So a lot of it gave an avenue. It gave a spotlight on short film as an art form, and it gave them a voice. It gave them a platform, and it was great, no? Kasi at the same time, it fed into the attention span of people online. Kasi maikli lang eh. You don't have to commit like 2 hours, di ba?
But now the whole world, the whole country's opened up. I talk about this moment for Philippine theater. How vibrant it is, how alive it is.
Alam mo pa yung na-miss namin bukod sa mga institusyon like CCP. Alam mo kung anong nag-save ng buhay ng mga performers? They've migrated to digital platform. Isa doon ay Kumu. Kung walang Kumu noon, and it was just almost came out right there, it also shifted. They were supposed to be kind of like a Facebook kind of a thing, and they shifted. All of a sudden, somebody told them, why don't you try streaming? So, itong nagbigay ng income sa karamihan ng mga performers because they went online, they performed in front of that camera or their phones, and they got, you know how it works, right? People will send you gifts. So, dun sila nabuhay. So, a lot of these people
They became content creators.
Correct. I think everybody became a content creator. I became a content creator. I vlog now because of that. Kasi walang magawa. So I started vlogging. Started by shooting my son. He said, stop it! Maya-maya sabi ko, maybe start doing stories, and maya-maya it became an art form. So I think one of the major things was that it became, everybody's a content creator now. Everybody shifted towards that. So now everybody's telling stories.
Was that hard?
I think hindi naman. Parang, well, we are storytellers as artists. We are storytellers. Nagbago lang yung medium at kung sinong kinakausap mo, hindi harap-harap sa maraming audience kundi sa isang camera lang. But ang response was also immediate. So it was good for a while. But the moment live came on, migration back to the live because there's nothing like it.
Talaga.
And that's what happened. 2021. Towards the end of 2021. Yeah, naumpisa na.
In fact, it was quite surprising because mid-pandemic, we were already beginning to sort of forecast what would happen as we emerge out of the pandemic and see how we could immediately deal with the destruction of the industry, especially the live entertainment industry. So in our initial parang forecast, sabi namin baka yung live industry might be one of the last to recover, especially tourism. Nandun kasama si tourism, kasama si live industry, live performing arts industry,
events.
Yeah, and surprisingly, and happily, we're proven wrong. Ang naunang mag-jump back was live theater, live music, live concerts.
Yeah.
And we said, paano nangyari ito na ganon? And I guess, unlike siguro because we were not in the street to begin with when the pandemic hit. So yung entry level natin mababa in terms of production and so on. So it was easy also to recover in terms of the production aspects of it. Mas madali.
What our biggest fear was, matatakot bang audience pumasok? Even because of that we had to postpone. You know what? They came full force. naka-ano lang,
Nakamask.
naka-mask, and they had to be, you have to show your vaccine card. But they came, and that's what it was, revenge spending. People were so hungry to gather again that they didn't care. They just went in there. And then sunod-sunod na, everybody, there's another big group of Bat Balera. It was called Mula sa Buwan, yung ginawa dun sa Samsung. Sila naman, they did a whole run. They had hit three weeks, and then natamaan sila ng COVID. So you can't, at that time, you also couldn't take it for granted na you're out of the woods. May nakahawa pa rin. So you still had to really follow strict protocols. Audiences still have to wear masks to today inside an enclosed space. So, but yeah, the audiences were ready to come.
It should be said na during the lockdown, what emerged in a very interesting way was nawala yung focus sa center, sa Manila, as a place of production of culture and arts and performing arts. Biglang nagkaroon ng blossoming of many productions coming out of the regions.
Yeah, so draw up a program for me. I mean, or draw up a program for your friends especially those na, maybe they've seen a couple of plays in the past few years. But to make that point na hindi lang sa buhay na buhay ito, but more of, ang saya nito, and you just don't know what you're missing. Draw up a program for me, let's say, for the next 6 months. Things to look forward to.
Maraming shows
and
na
where to
naka-line
go.
up.
No, where to go also. I mean, as you said, beyond even the things, I open my mind to things that I probably do not know about.
Well, there's the season, for example, that CCP is doing. No, so first we look at the major institutions, and I'm sure Audie can talk about the institutions he knows of. I can speak of CCP as far as I know, as its former artistic director. Even though the venues have closed, the amazing thing that they've been doing now is that, to a certain degree, they've seized this opportunity to move out of the center and bring the shows to the regions. So you have CCP everywhere. You have CCP in Sorsogon, you have CCP in Davao, you have CCP in the Visayas. Quite recently, they just finished with an outreach tours of the Philippine Philharmonic Orchestra, where once they were only like anchored at the CCP, but now you could listen to them as far as in Antique and so on and so forth. Alice Reyes Dance Philippines has been moving around in Dumaguete, in Bacolod, and so on. The education workshops have been doing like workshops with teachers. As we speak, I think they're in Marikina somewhere. So it's the wonderful thing is it's moved out of the physical center of CCP. It's moved to where the audiences are, and you find these artists immersed in specific communities, and I think it's very beneficial to the artists too, to see immediately this immediate connection with its audiences that were not able to even like visit them at the CCP. So that's what's happening at this at the CCP. You don't even have to go to CCP, but if you really want to go to the CCP, there's a black box theater. Fortunately, we finished building that black box during the pandemic, so now it has a season of its own where you can watch shows, theater plays. They just finished. Tanghalang Filipino is opening with this season. Anak Datu is one of them, which I'm directing, which was one of the first plays that was produced after the pandemic lockdown. They do concerts, they do film screenings, they do workshops. Cinemalaya is coming up in next week, in 2 weeks' time, at the Philippine International Convention Center. That's a 2-week program of more than 50 films, including 20 newly minted original Filipino films.
Will that have also a what do you call it, a commercial screening in
it
movie
will
house?
have like in selected cinemas at Ayala Cinemas.
Okay, good.
So in Metro Manila, and later on it will move on to regional cinemas. Sa ano,
sa field stage naman, mga member companies, everybody's producing, small and big, this year. So very, very active, very, very active. And this is where the young people are going. They kind of like to go to small venues. It's more communal for them. It's like, you know what the reason why young people are going? Hindi sila masyado nagde-date or nag-individual. They come in barkadas. So it's more like a social.
Is that a new thing?
It is a new thing.
Really?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what the studies are revealing, that they're going in groups. So it's more like a social, outing. So it's a good way to cater to that crowd. So yes, it can be fun. Theater can be fun, and a lot of the stuff is very relevant. Like just some top of my head, some of the shows is this very popular show coming out of UP that became very popular because of the political, reconciliation dinner.
The Quintos.
You're right. Chris also directed a wonderful comeback of a musical called Darawan, which now was made into Contramundum. It's going to have a repeat. It played in the Met, but now it's going to go to Samsung. There are just so many plays going on right now. If you just have to look at Facebook. And that's another thing. Dati, sa dyaryo mo titingnan. Ngayon, it just jumps at you on your IG. It's everywhere. So it's almost impossible to say, but hindi ko alam yun kasi it comes out all the time. And it's where the young people are looking.
We're speaking with Chris Millado. He says he's retired. But as Audie says, points out, he's actually full-time with everything he's doing. And of course, Audie Gemora.
Walang tumatanda sa teatro.
The OGs na hindi tumatanda ng teatro. But I'm interested in that. That's interesting. You said that the Gen Zs go. Kasi alam mo yung isang sabi ang DOT, I remember, former Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat, said ang isang insight nila sa tourism is that the millennials in particular and the Gen Zs, they will go anywhere and they will cross any mountain on foot and they will ford any river as long as dun sa dulo may Instagrammable.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that
True.
was really. But what's the? Walang camera during the play and so on. But what's the hook for millennials and Gen Zs? You think for this live experience and
I think it's really the stories that they can relate to. I'm so fascinated now because I come from ang training ko Broadway musicals and plays. So, but especially in the last 5-6 years, even before the lockdown happened, there's been a real shift to original Filipino stories. And it's so vibrant right now. You just need to go to Virgin Lab Fest to just, the audience is growing every year to see like all these one-act plays that have different stories that are so relatable to everybody. So there's just so many stories that I think kids are relating to.
yeah.
Hindi man sila makashoot ng picture during the show. After you can naman pag there are bows. And then the audience comes out naman. We are allowed to now.
No,
Finally.
I believe that. I believe
so
that.
there's a lot of possibilities to get your Instagram shot.
I envy you coming from journalism. I just came from a workshop and there's this discussion about can we save journalism without saving the journalists. Diba? I mean, public journalism fund, maybe there's a way na, we can't save the companies, but maybe there's a way to sustain some kind of news reporting and so on. But because you have a draw, you're insulated from all our concerns about disinformation, the creation of an alternative reality. Diba? Parang that's the truth. You stick to any electronic medium and you can exist in an alternate reality. In a live physical space, you can't.
Yeah.
Diba? You have to, speaking of reconciliation dinner, diba? Parang, wala, you can't avoid your mother, you can't avoid your, especially when it's staged in front of you. I mean, do you feel that there's not only the influence and the reach, I'm not asking you to save the world while it's collapsing all around mine, but I mean, do you think that's part of the value that people, whether they realize it or not, know that this is a real connection to a real world?
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I think, there's a term that Gen Zs use for these kind of experiences. I'm sure you've heard of this, core memory. This is already part of my core memory. They would always say that. And it's interesting when you ask them kung ano yung mga core memories nila, some of them would say but the show that I saw at CCP or the play that I saw, somehow it strikes them as part of their core memory. That means it was a turning point in their life. It was a profound experience that they've had. And I think because of the specific nature, nga, as you said, of the liveness of it, of
I
the
can't imagine
authenticity
anything
of it.
I can't imagine anything digital or anything that I
Yes.
just absorb over 2D to be
A core,
core memory,
yes. But for a lot, it has been their core memory. And we're not talking numbers because live performing arts, ilan lang yung audiences namin, like 400 at a time. Unlike sa digital that you reach thousands and millions. Pero yung impact is different. You know, they bring it home and they take
it's
it home
true.
and it
It's
becomes part of
and
the
I
core
bring my
memory.
home there. I think of 3 plays in particular that I watched before the pandemic. Rock of Ages is one. And yeah, that's a good point. I think that's part of my core memory because first I brought my parents. So at first it was me and my wife and our kids. Then the next time I said, we have to, kailangan dalhin natin si Ama at si Ina dito. Then they enjoyed it. After they enjoyed it, it was heading into December. And the family decision was, we have to bring the yayas.
Oh, cute.
That was our Christmas party. We brought
Oh,
everybody's
nice.
yayas.
Fantastic.
Diba? And that was core memory. And then I remember watching Angry Christ,
Uh-huh.
diba? And also Mabini, both in Dulaang UP. And I remember that my core memory there is sitting with my kids, diba? And that's something that you can't capture that.
It's a shared
Oh,
experience.
it's the shared experience.
Yeah.
Virgin Love Fest audiences are like that. A lot of them grew up with the festival, and now they're
Yeah.
bringing their. I know of a millennial who said, "How do you know about Virgin Love Fest?" And he said his dad, who was a lawyer, brought him to Virgin Love Fest, and now he's bringing his friends to
Oo.
watch the festival.
Nagkakahawaan.
So it has become like sort of a profound milestone somehow in their cultural lives.
I think what makes theater or live performance so different is that we're steeped on truth. Hindi kami pwede we reflect life. Hindi mahirap sa amin mag-fake. Kasi we're all about truth. So we bring authentic stories to the fore. I was very touched. I'm not going to go into the little controversy, but I found myself in a little controversy a few months back. And I had a talk with some of the writers who were backing up my organization, and one of them made a real plea, and I was so touched and moved by it. I'm gonna get teary-eyed. She said, "Audie, theater is the last bastion. Kayo na lang ang nagsasabi ng katotohanan." You know, that's why they were so possessive that our industry would not compromise or give in to whatever structures there are, because she's kayo na lang. I go to a theater show, like she mentioned, the one in CCP. You're the one that you directed.
Anak Dato.
Anak Dato. Sorry, senior. And she says, I can go to Anak Dato and hear the truth about what really happened. So please don't sell out. I mean, they were so concerned. Sabi ko, don't worry, not on my watch. But, kasi nga truth sayer ang teatro. And I think a lot of people who experience it know it and value it. So, yun. Yeah, we're it's bukod sa experience, we reflect truth. We reflect life the way it really is, and we can't fake it. So it's just such a good place to be in.
You were artistic director of CCP for 2 full decades.
Yes.
I think I'm safe to assume there must be some politics that
Of course,
you have to navigate.
One thing to remember is it is a government institution. It is a non-government institution which is supervised directly by Malacanang under the President's office. And we receive funds from government. So a lot of that plays into the whole way that you might want to deliver artistic experiences to audiences. But one thing that is wonderful, I think, with the CCP is that in 1986, it somehow broke away from that. It said, okay, we receive funds from you, but at the same time, because of the People's Power Revolution, because of the reorientation of the CCP, moving away from being just an instrument and a mouthpiece for the administration, the true, the good, and the beautiful, it said, okay, we'll democratize our opportunities, we'll Philippinize our content, and so on and so forth. And we will be the space for protecting artistic freedoms and creative freedoms. And that was the guiding artistic spirit all
That's the
throughout many
spirit. How do you
years.
do it institutionally? Or is it not actually institutional?
It is. It is. Well, it depends on. Remember, an institution is composed of actual leaders who have their own mindsets. So I guess it's up to the leaders how far they could sort of stretch this whole democratic space, or how to protect or even defend the democratic space all through the change of administrations. Because remember, each administration might have a different
appointee,
attitude.
At saka appointee, di ba? It's appointed.
And the board would have a different attitude in terms of this democratic space that we're speaking of. So I've experienced that to a certain extent, but I've always been to the point and made my position very clear during my whole.
He balanced it so well.
My whole term at the CCP, that I was working on the specific foundation. The reason why I joined CCP to begin with in 1986 was because of this space, and I will staunchly defend it. And everything will be about the artists. So that has been going on, and I've been on loggerheads with some leaders and some members of government at different points in my career with CCP, and one of them, the earliest one, was with Mideo Cruz, Hula Baloo, when we had this whole exhibit that was practically questioned by Senate, and it became a national issue.
Yeah, but also because that wasn't just, I mean, the reality is Mideo Cruz, that wasn't just politicians. That was the establishment. I mean, that was some of my friends. Diba? That was some of the people who go to my church. That was some specific churches in particular. Diba? I know that really drove a wedge. But hey, parang that's a very interesting episode, because I remember writing an editorial on it for Interaction, because I remember the line of some government officials then was, "This is art as terrorism," and I said, "Art as terrorism? Why don't you try democracy as religion?" Because that's the only way you can really have the religious freedom that you're supposedly trying to defend. But if I could bring you back to that time when, you know, how do you do that? How do you, as Audie said, you navigated everything very well. I think I remember Emi Abrera also facing and telling Jinggoy, with all due respect, no.
Yeah.
No, but how
Gusto
do you
mo ng
navigate?
refill?
Yes,
Refill?
let's have more.
No, only kasi parang bumibigat ang conversation.
But how do you? I mean, take me to the mind of somebody who's supposed to lead this institution, to navigate this through not just politics, but really the Philippines, and this complex society that we have.
It was a very difficult conversation. In fact, it was the very first. The very first situation I had to handle as in my first week as artistic director of the CCP. My very first week was like, what? I had to face the Senate, I had to face... It became a national, as you know. We were in headlines.
But you anticipated the controversy. You knew the content. I mean...
No. In fact, it was very funny. That particular exhibit was already in its last week. It had been there for 3 months.
Yeah.
It was already going to close down until someone
tried to vandalize.
Not vandalize, stepped in and got very offended, called in the press.
Yeah.
The press swooped in, somehow Imelda Marcos somehow found herself there. We didn't know how she got into the building. It blew up. It became a very big issue, and it became an issue. And we were on headlines saying that CCP was practicing a whole lot of desecration, offending religious feelings, and so on and so forth. We were called to the Senate. We had Senate inquiry. There were like positions saying that you should be defunded because you're using like public money to show offensive things like this. We were asked to defend the work, why we allowed it to happen. Of course, we took, I think, to answer your question, we took the side of freedom of expression. This was an artistic creation. It was, what was it? It was a figure that you could see by underpass of Quiapo. It was a photo representation of someone representing or imagining how Christ might have looked, which you find in calendars. And what artist did was he got another object which he finds under Quiapo, which is the ashtray of a phallus, and he stuck it on that figure. And at the same time, he put different photos of different politicians. And his whole point was that religion has become that. It's a religion of blindness, and it's about worshipping icons without even being critical to it.
And it's still there. It's late. I mean, we're having a moment like that even now, diba? With this Ama Namin performance.
Exactly.
Diba? And I mean, does that surprise you? That the reality is, it is still that kind of a society. I mean, it's not just politicians. It really is still that kind of a society. And do you encounter it more often than you would wish?
It happens everywhere, even in the States. You know, I mean, cycle yan eh. Cycle. If you look at history, cycle yan eh. So it just so happens we're at that time when all these populists, you know, heads are leaders of countries, and a lot of these very conservative people have the voice. Unfortunately.
But I'd like to believe that somehow the environment has changed with regards to that. Even then, I think it's also like certain laws which are so outmoded. And remember this law
offending
about
religious.
This is like a law that was drawn up in the 1950s, which is actually quite anachronistic at this time. And so much argument has gone up, and then even when I talk to the younger set and find out especially from the Gen Zs, and find out about they're totally divided about the whole issue, especially that issue that came up about Ama Namin. And then if you break it down, that whole cultural act, I mean, if you consider it as an act of performance, it has so many things going for it, you know? Because there was like one argument I read. What's the whole offensive thing about it? I mean, do we only celebrate the Christ image as somebody who's suffering, who's solemn and somber? Can we not celebrate it as? Can we not celebrate the Christ figure as somebody celebratory and fun? Jesus Christ Superstar.
Jesus Christ Superstar,
you know,
No,
Godspell.
I guess because it was played by a transgender in a gay bar. I guess that was the issue.
Oh, but I heard him speak, and I heard him. He was interviewed by CNN, and alam mo, his point. Even I didn't think of it. Pero sabi niya, yes, on the one hand, free expression, diba? And on the other hand, he actually said, "I'm sorry if people got offended." But sabi niya, I've been doing this for a long time because this is my healing for a church that has always rejected me. And I was like, how many people are going to hear this? This point. It's not even an argument. It's just a statement of fact. This is me reconciling or trying to reconcile the fact that I've always been rejected. And it's just, I mean, those are the kinds of things.
I'm glad that there are a lot of some priests and bishops who came to his defense in a sense. and not to be so judgmental and
Yeah.
create a lynch mob.
I guess ang question ko, are you surprised, as I discussed with Bebang C when she was here, that in this day and age, the Bebang C and also si Det Neri, kinuwento nila, recently, some time ago, basta she got this backlash because she wrote something with a lesbian theme. And sabi ko, when was that? 2016. Sabi ko,
Not too long ago.
2016.
Yeah.
Diba? Parang, that's not a long time ago. That's still, it's the 21st century. You're past the... I mean, are you still surprised by how conservative this society is? And at the same time, I want to ask, because that hasn't stopped the creative sectors naman, diba, from exploring. I think there is a golden age of exploration of things that we need to talk about, that we haven't talked about a lot. But are you surprised by both sides of that? The conservatism, and then at the same time, I think there is this, well, to use a phrase, golden age. A golden age of the creative people saying, no, let's just be creative. Let's do things. And we're actually proving our point. We have such a big audience now.
Well, not at all, because as you know, our country is the largest Catholic country in
Wala pang
Asia.
divorce hanggang ngayon. Wala pa rin.
In terms of all of these other developments in our Southeast Asian, they already have gay rights in Thailand, in Taiwan, and other parts of Asia. While we're we can't even pass the SOGI bill in Congress. We can't even get through that. And I think that because of our historical religious context with Catholicism.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and somehow this has been some of these found themselves into law outmoded law on religious feelings, which ironically at some point backlashed in the church.
Yeah.
Because some citizens used it against the church mismo. That same law which was supposed to defend them. So these factors, I think, that have been entrenched both not only culturally but also in terms of our legally in our society, somehow reinforces some of these conservative sectors.
Sadly, it's not even religion sometimes. It's really
Yeah.
hypocrisy
Yeah.
more than anything. When you have a country whose morals have really gone down the drain, it's so easy for them to just point at a group and say, kayo ang sinner, kami hindi. I mean, I think more than that act, what really offended me were all these politicians jumping in on it, because I said, oh my gosh.
In fact, let me pick up on that and let me flash back to the Medeo Cruz experience. One of the most parang aha moments for me was when they called the national artists to come on board to sort of become resource persons for the whole controversy. And they called the late F. Chenil Jose, God bless his soul, to be one of the resource persons. And one of the Congress people asked him, well, what do you think of this artwork? And then F. Chenil Jose says, calmly in front of everyone, of all the congressmen present, it doesn't offend me. In fact, I find plunder more offensive.
Good for
The
him.
whole
Good for him. Oh my goodness.
applause, the whole room just broke into applause.
Yeah.
And I think this exemplifies what you're talking about. This whole hypocrisy that is going on. What is considered offensive is basically from the point of view of the powers that be.
And it's something that's actually we can perennially constantly say that can become a standard line anytime anybody gets called to the Senate. Yeah. Anyway, so what's next for theater? What are you excited about? And not just in terms of productions, but what do you see as the new trends? What's new that surprised you na mukhang may direction to?
Like I said, so many wonderful stories coming out of the woodwork. Also the world is looking for global stories. They're looking for new stories.
Yeah.
They've become more exclusive. Hollywood's become so inclusive lately. So many wonderful stories coming out of Hollywood, and Asian stories and stuff like that. I think people are looking for that. Ayaw na nila ng paulit-ulit na lang.
Mm.
So I'm excited about the stories that are coming forth, the music that's coming forth, the artwork that's coming forth. It's so vibrant.
Mm.
Even the stuff on TikTok sometimes that's like sometimes when I start I can't stop because there's so many creative things there. I mean, we've gone beyond just the shallow things. There's a lot of information that comes on the digital platform from ordinary people. It's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, well, to me, I'm really stoked with the way that my whole work in arts and culture has come full circle. Like, it came from the context of community theater and theater in the streets and so on. Now I'm back there, and I'm back in doing work with artists in Dapitan, in Dipolog, and I'm very stimulated by the work because immediately you see the impact that you have on audiences. You see the impact that you have with local artists, and you see how it's beginning to contribute in their initiatives, in heritage, in arts,
The
and
artists
culture.
are we paying back the artists? I mean, are we sustaining the? I mean, what's sustaining it? Is
Industry-wide,
it industry-wide? Is it just being sustained by?
Kulang na kulang pa. Wala talagang government support as much as we'd like.
Although there's been inroads being created now with the creative industry bill that's being passed in Congress through the efforts of Congressman Toff de Venecia,
who's an
who's
artist.
an artist, a theater director.
Yeah.
So industry wide, I think there's been Phil Stage. One of the impetus of Phil Stage, I'd like to believe, is that to professionalize the
Our dream is to be the Broadway of Asia, because I think we've got second to none. We're second to none.
Yeah.
We just don't have that kind of government push that say Korea has.
Yeah.
But if our government understood the potential that we could bring into the GDP, my God, I mean, and just really fully support us, we're so talented.
Our CEO at Puma Podcast has an op-ed podcast on that. One of the points he makes is that NTF-LCAC has a bigger budget than CCP and NCCA combined.
In fact, I just heard that they've even cutting down the budget of CCP next year.
What?
Really?
Yeah. And so they're pleading with Congress and budget to restore their budget at least to levels before, because it will be very difficult and challenging for them to go
what's
through
the
with
argument
programs.
for that? For cutting the budget?
That I don't know. I just heard the current artistic director, Dennis Marasigan, sort of mentioned it during one of our press launches.
Wow.
Saying that they're now, from their most recent budget hearings, their budget was being
Kailangan
cut down.
madagdagan ng confidential funds.
Speaking of a budget that's bigger than everything else. Diba? But one of the things I always ask, for example, mayors, I always ask, we all know you go abroad. Diba? We all know you get, you can be cosmopolitan if you wanted to, and you get exposed to different ideas. And then you come back and you say, ang ganda-ganda ng transport system doon. Oh, ang ganda ng sistema nila. Sabi ko, I always ask, why is it not that simple to just go abroad, get inspired, come back, have an idea, and then say, we're gonna do this? I imagine that our legislators, our leaders, to a certain level, I grant sincerity. I also think they want us to excel. I think the Creative Industries Act is hopefully a good sign. But why isn't it that simple? That you have legislators and policymakers of a particular class who watch your plays, diba? And who watch our productions, and who are quote-unquote cultured and exposed and cosmopolitan. Why isn't it that simple?
Kasi self-care muna. Self-care muna. Sila muna.
One of the learnings that I've had on the ground quite recently, as I've begun to see how art, culture, work begins to cascade in the level of local government and localities, which I didn't see when I was sitting at the CCP in that building. You were just signing papers and directly working with resident companies and programs that were centered all at feeding audiences here. But when you're at the level of the probinsya, the city, doon sa regions, then you see how much of it like filters down, and what are the challenges, and what the difference that could happen if certain factors come together. And my learning is that if your leader, if your LGU and your private sector locally come together and are able to put their get their act together, things could happen. And I've seen it happening at least in 3 areas that I've worked with quite recently. And what are the factors? You have young, dynamic, open-minded leadership. Young is important, and most young because they have a youthful outlook. They're open-minded, and they're quite been exposed to a lot of culture, arts, and other ideas. No, so if you have a leader that's adept and exposed to the arts and culture work, you have a private sector whose heart is in heritage. Put them together, and things do happen. In fact, that I see that happening in Dapitan. I see that happening in Bacolod. I see that happening in small places in Bohol, like Hagna. I see that happening. In Malay, Aklan. These are really small spaces where you have leaders. Most of them have been like educated in Manila, and now they're back in their home province, like doing work. And now they're starting to make things move. In fact, they're building up performing arts centers and structures where once there was none. You know, they're pushing like heritage projects where once they were just like set aside.
Na-expose sila kasi dati, they're either artists or have been exposed
I'd like
artists.
to believe that this is the work that we started planting many years ago, educating this next generation leaders, and now they've found themselves in positions where now they can make a difference.
You created core memories.
So what you're saying is sow in the youth.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah, because you'll become the leaders.
Yeah.
And now, and that's the whole. And I think I mentioned in serendipitous moments when exactly that was what happened. It was part of their core memory, acting in a show that you directed. It was part of their core memory to be present in one of the projects that now they're reminded of how powerful it was, and now they're in the position to make the same things happen in their own locality.
Chris Millado, as you know, was director of the Cultural Center of the Philippines for 20 years, so he knows what he's saying, especially now going back to all of these small towns. Audie Gemora, a pillar, of course, in Philippine theater for as long, let's just say. So there's
or longer.
I have the privilege of continuing my conversation with them. We'll fill up our glasses and have a few more minutes here. Unfortunately, you will have to leave us. As you know by now, 1 oras lang po to. Catch us again next Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Manila time on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, at saka sa Puma Podcast. That's our company, and we will be uploading all the audio, purely as audio, as podcast on Puma Podcast. You can find that on Spotify, Apple, or kung saan man kayo Puma Podcast. Ako po si Roby Alampay. This is Roundtable. Maraming salamat po. That's it. That's
Wonderful format. This is great.
So relaxed.
Thank you.
When is it showing?
Thursdays. So next Thursday. Actually, is it Thursday now?
Today
Thursday's
is
Thursday now, di ba?
Thursday ba ngayon? Wednesday.
I-plug na natin. I-plug ko to.
Wala tayong photo.
Ito, i-vlog ko na. So we just spent a whole hour talking. So should I be asking you the questions?
Okay, go ahead.